I'm torn between feeling very sorry for you and finding you terribly attractive.
Professional assassination. It's the highest form of public service.
That's just to freak out people on YouTube. I knew it. Right.
30 seconds.
Lovely. And hello, chat room. Good morning.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Things are going to start happening to me now.
Live exclusively for WCPT AM and FM in Chicago and streaming worldwide at chicagosprogressivetalk.com. Standing up and speaking out, here's Hal Sparks.
All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
To do the vibes.
Good morning and welcome to the show, everybody. Let's start off with something that I think is particularly germane to the conversation that's going on this week. And, of course, the big stories coming out this week is that Mueller is issuing subpoenas through a Washington grand jury. This was, of course, immediately followed by a curiously circular press conference by the DOJ and Jeff Sessions about the importance of going after leakers after the transcripts. I thought, quite frankly, the transcripts of the phone calls were SNL sketches that had just been leaked to the press. But unfortunately for the president, the actual transcripts of him speaking to the president of Mexico and I think the Australian prime minister came to light this week as they were leaked to the press. And I looked through them. We'll go over a little bit of what was in them today. They're hilariously slapdash. This is the moment to moment of a president realizing that the job he got is not the job he ran for. That there's a huge difference between being the head of a democracy and running a family-run real estate business with no shareholders and investors who are, it increasingly seems, are simply there to shuffle money around, not to make a profit. Because there are a couple of things about this, and I want to discuss this both with callers and with our chat room today. In the whole of the Russian experience, in dealing with Donald Trump, the idea that the Russians would want to meddle in our election is not a surprising one at all. We've had sanctions against them. We sanctioned their allies throughout the world because they tend to rub elbows very comfortably, whereas America has a sordid history of on the sly dealing through the CIA with tribal warlords and the like in an attempt to create balance in an imbalanced situation, and some of it is straight up grift and in other cases it's literally a policy playing out in the ugliest way possible. At least America it has a tendency overall, with rare exception, to at least pretend we're not doing it. There's at least this kind of, at least there's some feigned shock that occurs when America is found to be torturing people. There are people who are genuinely shocked. I'm not saying that, that it's all phony, but I am saying that there's some, that a lot of the people who are even for it, it's like it's like the Russian fallback at Fox News. It starts with, that's not happening. That's not happening. Oh, there's no collusion. And then it goes to, well, there's collusion, but it's not a crime, to collusion jokes. It's no big deal. It's so silly. We don't even really, what, are you colluding with him this afternoon over lunch? Like, they literally carry it that far. But it starts with, no, that's not, right? So that's at least our standard operating procedure in those situations, where you find that if we are engaged in unethical or illegal behavior that the American public did not sign off on, there's at least this barrier of discord with that when that becomes a reality, and in the call for. We can get into whether people ever go to jail for it. We can get into whether people get tried for war crimes that they commit and all that. But again, at least the premise is there. In Russia, there's no premise. You're not even allowed to ask in the first place, and why would you? And if you're in a position of power, you are there because Putin thinks it's okay for you to be in a position of power. That's the superstructure of the government in Russia. They don't even... it's an absurdity. That's why they joke about where Lavrov jokes about, the firing of Comey like it was nothing. You're kidding. Well, that's because in his country, that's exactly what would happen. Okay, so point being is that even when pressed on it, we've got information that this actually happened, Putin's response was, well, we didn't do it militarily. It's just some good old-fashioned... patriotic Russians that got to hacking because they don't like the sanctions and they love Mother Russia, and therefore they're gonna come after the United States, and this is just personal retaliation. These are just patriots, right? But at least he admitted to it. Okay, and then all the intelligence communities come out. By the way, there were 17 and now there's 4. There are 4 heads that oversee the others. All of those are in agreement. They're subsidiary groups that they oversee, that the DNI, the CIA, the FBI, and the DHS oversee. There is variant belief in 2 of those organizations about A, the extent, and B, the directness of it, and whether or not they bounced it through Iran and North Korea. But when they say there's no disagreement amongst the intelligence community that Russia was the primary player in messing with our democracy and pushing fake news stories and basically having a propaganda attack on the United States, this idea that there's some sort of disagreement that Trump threw up there is ridiculous. But the weirdness of it all, for me, and it is incredibly curious and has been throughout, is this president's inability to call Russia out for it. That even when he manages to do it, even when they manage to get a bill to his desk for him to sign, they give him cover by putting North Korea and Iran in there. The new Iran sanctions added to it. By the way, Iran not materially in violation of the Iran agreement. They put that in there so that he can say, well, this is just punishing any country that messes with us, and they're all basically the same. That Iran meeting, for the most part, it's... insofar as anybody outside the intelligence community's awareness that I'm aware of, keeping up their end of the bargain in terms of not developing a nuclear program, whereas in North Korea it's full steam ahead, and Russia has had a functioning one since the 40s. But this constant, curious drip from the president that always diverts attention and blame away from the Russians has struck me, and I'm sure most of the people listening, as curious. Even if you're a Trump supporter, this is one of the areas where if you really have a conversation, it's hard to pin down why. You know, you can say, well, we don't go to war, and it's our ally. If you really go into the deep reads on certain evangelicals or certain Southern Republicans a lot, there is according to polls, there is a tendency to favor Russia on a couple of fronts that shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. One is it a primarily white country. The dominant religion is Christian. There is what little religion there is sort of an enforced protectorate of that. They come down hard on Muslims. They have a very sort of strong and ferocious anti-gay administration. So no pride marches, no transgender rights, none of that. And so it is in many ways a utopia for a big swath of the miracle 33% that still supports Trump. That group, that 33, that bottom that he has hit so far, and by the way, it will continue to go down. That 33%, though, looks at Russia in some ways like, yeah, well, actually, they got oil. They don't produce a lot. They're not one of these, they don't make a car worth a damn, or they're not really known for any of their technology per se, but they're an industrialized country. They have a lot of, deep cultural roots, and they're largely white, and they have no problem rounding up bad hombres, and they are ferociously Christian in that. And so that point of it is incredibly that point of it has always, I think that overlap with the Trump voter shouldn't come as any surprise to anyone. And why, when he defends Russia in those circumstances, there is a I would say 18% of that 30, about 2/3 of that 33%, 18% of the American public who, considering their own personal bigotries, are quite comfortable with Russia and how it's run. And let's be abundantly clear. I'm not. I don't. The idea that you would want a basically the mob running your country, as long as they swept away the enemies you didn't like, is the most ignorant position to be in as a human being, simply because once you outlive your usefulness, become a useful eater or a useful idiot or a worthless eater, you're kind of vacillating between the two of those points. You're going to get a bag over your head and dragged out of the room, and it's real easy to get rid of people in a society like that. That's what makes America special. That is specifically what makes America special. We got to take a break. When we come back, why then is Julian Assange so comfortable with nary a bad word towards Russia, and really has a huge dog in the fight of Mueller and whether the FBI finds something on Trump? What is that? What is that? Is he... Because it's not... You're such a fan of America, you don't want our legal system to play out? I don't... It's hinky. We'll be back. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide, on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk, AM 820. And, of course, go to housesparks.tv, where I'm streaming live on YouTube right now.
I watch the world float to the dark side of the moon. After all, I knew it had to be something to do with you. I really don't mind what happens now and then, as long as you'll be my friend at the end. If I go crazy, then will you still call me?
Yeah, hinky is a sort of a Chicago term for wonky, quirky, strange, mysterious. Hinky, we say hinky. Don't use words that aren't words around. It's hinky. We say hinky. It's hinky. I don't know. Hinky. Anybody? The fugitive? All right. Thanks for the tweet, Rocky Mountain Mike. Here's the big improvement I made this week. Hold on. This guy right here. Dunk. Again, we're always seeking as best we can to freak out Alex Jones and his ilk. But piece by piece. Oh, and there is a little bit of an addition. This is, I suppose, this is just for Rocky Mountain Mike in particular. Let's see, what's the...
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my underground lair.
We now have that ability. So.
Where's my money?
Sound is considerably deader. Sounds great. Okay. Excellent. Vive la résistance. Merci beaucoup, Billy. $1 million. I don't actually have that one. I do have some not safe for work ones that I can only play during the break. And I have to keep track of which ones they are, because I'm like, oh, that one's not okay. No, it isn't.
20 seconds.
Okay, excellent.
Don't look now, but there's one man too many in this room, and I think it's you.
Okay.
This is Tom Hartman, and you're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program, mega worldwide on Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT.
So yesterday, Julian Assange tweets out this tweet, is Robert Mueller a dirty cop? And has been kind of running this, the deep state storyline and this mix of, is the investigation into Donald Trump, overreach? Is that, this... Is it, and it's in a strange way, it's as if, imagine him coming to the defense of Dick Cheney during the Iraq War, because most of the defense that's coming out, is sort of tinted in that way as far as languaging goes, and the super odd part of it is that all the while Julian Assange, again, seems to be in constant defense of Donald Trump. This literally, Jeff Sessions has a press conference yesterday about the leaking of the wonderfully comedic transcripts of the Australian Prime Minister and the Mexican president talking to Donald Trump and reassuring him, and most of what sounds like the preamble to a Viagra ad, you're going to be okay. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It happens to every dictator eventually. That not only have the number of civilian deaths in war actions by the United States in the first 6 months of the Trump administration equal the number in 8 years of the Obama administration. 8 years. And, I mean, drone strikes, all the reasons you have to be concerned about American, intervention and war behavior and the civilian casualties caused by that are completely justified. But somehow that justification, that feeling, that the importance of mitigating civilian deaths and not getting more involved in specifically in war theaters where we're looking for regime change, what have you, but the equivalent number of dead people, dead civilians, non-combatants, people without a gun in their hand, in the first 6 months of the Trump administration, you had in 8 years of Obama. And by the way, this is not because a cleanup of missions that Obama had ordered and they were just carried out, and Trump is now realizing, oh my gosh, look at all these civilians who are getting killed in this process. We need to work on this. Or there is zero effort in the Trump administration to mitigate any of this. And as a matter of fact, they almost take it as a reassurance, it seems, in everything that they say. This you can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs idea. It's amazingly violent to consider. Same number of dead in 6 months as in 8 years. Jeff Sessions comes out and says we're tripling the number of investigations into leakers that happened under Obama. Tripling the number. And yet, who is Assange coming to the defense of? The Trump administration, and specifically Donald Trump himself. Now, the odd part, and what it seems to be playing out, if you've been following along with the Washington Post and the New York Times reporting, or even the statements of the White House themselves, which is the most curious part of it, or the family of Donald Trump. Most of our assets, we get an inordinate amount of cash from Russia. The fact that Deutsche Bank is one of the primary backers of Trump, and that they were fined $600 million for laundering $10 billion in Russian money that comes from not just sapping the coffers of an entire country, but arms trading with North Korea and Iran beyond the UN sanctions, while all the time on the UN Security Council vetoing any effort to stop these things. So, all right. So, Mueller, this is from Washington Post, this August 3rd. Robert Mueller III, the special counsel investigating Russia's attempts to disrupt last year's presidential election, has issued subpoenas from a Washington-based grand jury in recent weeks, according to several lawyers involved in the case. At least some of the subpoenas were for documents related to the business dealings of Michael T. Flynn, the retired general who briefly served as President Trump's national security advisor. And when he says briefly, he means briefly. Mr. Flynn is under investigation for foreign lobbying work, as well as for conservatives conversations he had during the transition with Sergei Kislyak, who was Russia's ambassador to the United States. You know, Sergei Kislyak, the guy that Trump laughed with while giving intel that came from an Israeli source that was later burned because of him giving that information, and that Jeff Sessions lied about meeting with under oath. All of which, all these details, every single one of them, had this been a Democrat, Fox News, you would just, if you turned on Fox News, it would just look like the fireplace log tape you could run on Christmas, but with a ticker tape. It would just be constantly ablaze. It would just be just hair on fire and screaming. But since it's Trump and since it's Russia, shrug. And that in and of itself is incredibly curious, and I will get to why in just a minute. And we're going to take your calls, too, 773-763-9278. There was a chain of, I guess technically, tweets dealing with a lot of what was going on in the, with the investigation this week, and kind of the back and forth, the importance of certain elements of it. And I don't mind people saying, well, making a conversation, this is important, this is not important. People will get too bogged down in this piece. They'll get carried away. Don't get carried away with this. This isn't going to go anywhere. I don't mind them having that conversation. But trying to tamp down on even discussing it or looking into it is the curious part. And I always find it incredibly suspect when someone, goes about saying there's no there, when there are increasingly a lot of elements that are absolutely true. That at this point, there is no arguing on so many fronts Trump's financial ties to Russia. If you go by the statements of his adult children who are currently running his company, if you go by his statements, and then you simply extract that the son who currently runs the business is on record repeatedly as saying that they have an inordinate amount of cash coming in from Russia, all the money they need to cover their debts and to buy property. That being said, and the father's inability to say a single bad word about somebody who literally is snuffing journalists and snatching up members of his own tail. The purge going forth in Putin's administration, people are getting bags put over their head and they're being put in jail. Well, we got to take a break. When we come back, I want to read a tweet for you that just came out last night. That from an account, by the way, that has been right all along. We'll be back. It's the House Sparks radio program Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it might be on. Be right with you, kids. Hold on one moment. Gathering a little. And by the way, hello chat room. Thanks for joining us today. And hold on one second. I'll get back on camera real quick because I want to thank and Billy and Fessor Frink for super chatting us. Thank you so much. Bless your heart. Appreciate it. Let's see. Why does this? Oh, the stream health looks okay on my end. Curious. Ew. I see. Okay, that's good. I was concerned. I didn't know what that was. Hold on. There we go. Hi, Natalie. Good morning. What's up, Ann? How you doing? Just scroll down. There it is. Yo, yo. Johnny has a gig at noon today, like an afternoon gig. He's playing with his AC/DC cover band. Who, when I come to Chicago, I hope to hop up on stage with. Maybe in honor of the times we've talked about it, I'll do Yes, Jack. Hidden behind is the Illuminati. I'm actually reading a book right now. This is just to freak everybody out. This will help, right? Code of the Illuminati. It's actually from the Forgotten Books. It's literally a book about the Illuminati. Like it's essentially the same story that Alex Jones tells. But this book was written in, 1797? This book was written in 1797. And they've been warning us all this time. It's hilarious, because it's basically like what they tell you is Any day now. Dude, any day now, the Illuminati is going to, unleash. They're going to kill the population down to a minimum and all that, so that they can rule. And there's enough resources
15
now.
seconds.
Thank you.
And
Enough.
we have callers.
Okay, great.
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
Welcome back to the show. Let's take some callers because I want to get straight into this. I'll dig up the tweet I was talking about in just a moment, and I'll pay it specific. But you're going to want to stick around because it's an interesting one. Like I'm at this point, I am completely numb almost on some level to another Trump administration official. Being caught on tape talking to the Russians, it's entered the point of of course. But this one, when I heard about this one surprised me. That not that it happened, but that it was on tape. But we'll get to that in just a second. Who do we have, Lady B?
We have Steve from the Gold Coast.
Excellent. Hey, Steve, welcome.
Thank you for taking my call. And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, Julian Assange leaves us scratching our heads. Having gone from, what was a hero on the left, at least for many people on the left, to this strange sort of caricature of his former self. Someone who, out of all of these possible options, it's sort of applying Occam's razor about what the most likely explanation is for a given event or story. His is the most convoluted of answers. And,
right.
it's never about Donald Trump. It's never about the Russians. We're expected to forget all of these obvious links and connections. And instead, we're supposed to believe in things like, Seth Rich was murdered to protect, these secrets on...
Debbie Wasserman Schultz, right.
Exactly.
Yep.
All this, the family says it's nonsense. Fox retracted the story. The leading investigator that Fox used said that Fox quoted him out of context, lied about what he said. Yet this is still a narrative that people are pushing out there.
That's
and
right.
Again, Julian Assange offered a bounty for this so-called, killer that, is part of a botched robbery. Yes, no, he hasn't been caught. So somehow, because he hasn't been caught, we're supposed to believe that bounty has some validity in terms of, bolstering this story. I mean, I agree with you. You just don't understand what his motivations could possibly be, other than who knows as to who's funding him, who's behind him. Julian Assange, again, it was a strange character to begin with. So, I don't place much stock in what he thinks, and I don't know why anybody in America would, other than, being someone who's sort of the face of WikiLeaks. What else has he done that would merit your placing faith in him?
I think delivering Edward Snowden to Russia and effectively leaving him there is
right, exactly.
Is exactly what that is the single greatest effort that individually that Julian Assange at WikiLeaks had a massive control over at this point. Because especially if you watch, I think what's the name? Is it Risk? I forget the name of it, but the movie that just came out where the woman was doing a documentary about him, where she basically came at it from the point of view of being a sycophant in the beginning, and then realized that he was misogynistic and creepy and would just scream at her. After a while, she put out this other, the movie took a real turn as you watch it. But ultimately, what came of whistleblowers giving information to Julian Assange? Snowden is still in Russia, and he's not going to get out anytime soon. Chelsea Manning went to jail. Reality Winner is going to go to jail. And to Chelsea Manning's credit, Chelsea Manning, I think of all of them, of all the whistleblowers we've gotten the most attention about, deserves, I think, the most credit and room. And again, you don't have to agree 100% with her behavior or her inclinations about these things. No one is on a 100% scale. But I will say that what Chelsea is purported to have gone through in terms of seeing a crime, seeing Reuters photographers gunned down and that video being hidden and feeling that was evidence of a crime and that needed to come out, and then going about doing that and serving jail time for doing it is an honorable act on all measures. Hiding in the Ecuadorian embassy so you don't have to face rape charges because you think you're going to have to defend your whistleblower status in an American court when there's little to no reason to believe that Sweden is going to hand over for extradition somebody for doing that in regards to that, based on them capturing for that. That's, you can believe that or either way. It doesn't quite matter. But the point is, he claims he's the longest detained person in history without charge. When he's not being detained, he's hiding in the Ecuadorian embassy, and he didn't get Snowden to safety to protect him after he came forward with the information that he came forward with. He took him to China first and bounced him into Russia, and he's still there to this day. So they have Snowden in the country. He can't leave, and Julian Assange can't say a bad word about Putin for some reason. It's the same head scratcher that should affect anybody who is curious about Trump's relationship with Russia. You may not believe that there's anything to that there. Then why can't you just say it? Why can't you? It is the left's version of radical Islamic terrorism. At this point, the right was so adamant, you must say radical Islamic terrorism. This became a functioning point. And yet, at the same time, Trump can't even say Russia meddled in our election when his own intelligence services tell. Your own intelligence service, by the way, is telling you don't say radical Islamic terrorism because it disenfranchises and scares off a lot of supporters in those areas of the world who are feeding us intel and helping us out. And it makes villains of an entire group of people, because you must include their religion in there, and you don't seem to have an issue with when the Bundys of the world or the right wing white supremacist militias who view themselves as Christian soldiers. You don't call those radical Christian biker gangs or militias or what have you. When they train a sniper's rifle on a cop's head at a standoff over paying proper fees for the use of grazing land. Let's understand that there were members of the Bundy family and friends who were pointing sniper rifles at police officers' heads for serving papers and attempting to get fees paid for grazing lands. This is what's worth shooting a cop over, according to those folks. But you don't call those radical Christian terrorists. So, anyways, your own intelligence service, and thanks for the call, Steve, by the way. Your own intelligence service says don't use radical Islamic terrorism. It doesn't help us. It's not functional. It doesn't serve anything. It's red meat to your base, maybe, but it's not going to actually help us solve the problem. But telling people that Russia is meddling in our election and feeding combative and fake news stories into our social media and stuff, the awareness of that actually would help the conversation. It would actually benefit us if people said, okay, wait, I just read this story on Facebook, or I read this story on Twitter, or I saw this on RT or Sputnik, or it's being linked through there, or I've noticed that on Alex Jones and RT, they're saying the exact same thing. Maybe I should take this with a grain of salt, no matter what political problem I have with the other side. Tap the brakes a little bit and have a conversation, right? That would be helpful. Saying, yeah, the Russians are planting fake news stories through Macedonian hackers and getting on Facebook and getting on Twitter and feeding these stories. The awareness of that would be helpful, because even if you believe in the policies of what Trump wants to do, or you believe in the policies of what Bernie wants to do, or if you were you believe in Hillary Clinton, you can at some point tap the brakes in your discourse with another American citizen long enough to hear them out and make your argument with no violence in it. But if in the case of, the Trump administration not wanting to say Russians are meddling in our election, they're meddling in our democratic discourse. They are helping, foment the divide. And if you buy into that, and believe me, folks, I will give as good as I get on Twitter and on Facebook when I'm talking to people, or on this show, of course. But I'll never question anybody's humanity and their ability to make that argument. I'll question their argument, and I will mock that argument if I think it's absurd. But as an American citizen who has the right to vote, I will allow for their belief system to exist, even if it makes me uncomfortable. That's the point. But if somebody is trying to, villainize normal political behavior, I find that suspect. And so we know that Russia specifically has targeted that as a goal. So you should, in your awareness politically, it helps to have that in the back of your head while you're doing it. And so it would help if the president was going, you know what, there's a lot of fake news stories out there that are trying to divide us as a country. It's best if you go, always remember, this is America. We're Americans. We disagree vehemently. We have the right to believe, even extreme things. We have the right to speak our minds, even if it's uncomfortable or ugly. But we don't question each other's humanity, and we try to develop a situation where it may be slow and plodding, but the majority of people move towards a bettering of the American experiment all the time. Like that's why we get bored with, the non-reality show conversation that happens. We got to take a break. When we come back, more of your calls. 773-763-9278. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. All right, let's see if I can dig this one. This was right there.
$30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
You still have like 5 callers, 6
Excellent.
callers.
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
Welcome back to the show. So, we've heard a lot of this conversation, too, about unmasking. This was the big concern on the right. Unmasking. They're unmasking people. The Obama administration unmasked hundreds of people. It looked into who was talking to whom illegally. They, Loretta Lynch and Obama looked over, and they were wiretapping Trump Hotel. They were wiretaps, talking to people, folks. I'm talking to lots of people, I talk to people, I talk to everyone. Why can't we talk to people? The idea is that the Obama administration, this is the narrative from the Trump team and the folks over at Fox News, that in the normal course of life, the Trump administration and in their transition ended up talking to, Russians or other people. It doesn't matter. I talk to everybody, right? And in those conversations, if an American is swept up in this conversation, it is standard operating procedure to keep them out of the intel of it. It's really about the foreign agent, because foreign agents can reach out to people, and the people that they're reaching out to aren't necessarily guilty of anything, right? They haven't actually done anything but be contacted. And in a lot of ways, they could be swept up in something. They may not be aware that they're being massaged into some form of, asset. But eventually, if it does look like they're turning, if they're as dumb as Carter Page and they're caught openly discussing this, and then they go on Chris Hayes and other shows, then of course, the unmasking of them is going to make a heck of a lot of sense, right? So, in terms of the Trump's reaction to this, his administration and Fox News specifically, the unmasking, they loved that term, very sexy, very covert sounding. The Obama administration isn't even supposed to look. They're not even supposed to look. And by the way, there is zero difference between this conversation and the conversation of, I got pulled over for a speeding ticket. They should have never found the body in the trunk. There was no probable cause to look in my trunk. They had no right to look in my trunk. And I want the body thrown out. I want the tarp thrown out and the rope thrown out and the videotape of me killing the person and the 16 kilos of heroin, because all they had probable cause was a busted taillight. And so therefore, that was part of an illegal search and seizure. This is the argument, by the way, that whatever you believe about probable cause and police overreach and what have you, used to be a very right-wing argument for it. That if the cops pull you over for a crack in your windshield, they should be able to get out the rubber gloves and give you a full cavity search, because they're cops, and if they smell trouble, they should be able to give you the once-over, right? And, the straight-up Dirty Harry. This is like, if I pulled you over as a cop, this is my prerogative, okay? And in doing so, in the switch about the unmasking, the Trump White House and Republicans in general seem panicked about this, have now taken on the role of the you should have never gotten to look in my trunk in the first place. And without a stitch of irony, literally, they are the character in a Dirty Harry movie screaming for their Miranda rights that they so despise in every other circumstance. And this, I think, goes to the difference between what I would call, like, white collar and every other collar crime. Is that in Republican circles, there is a very important distinction, they think, between white collar and what they would call blue collar or no collar crime. And the distinction is that when blue collar or no collar crime happens, and somebody gets shot in a hook, holding up a liquor store, or they carjack a car, or they threaten somebody or what have you, that is a violent act on the fabric of our society. These people need to go. They need, they're animals. They have total disdain for civil life, and they should be thrown in jail and, put them under the jail and throw away the key. But white-collar criminals, no harm, no foul. It's kind of like, falling for an email where you give away your life savings to a Nigerian prince, and it is 6 of one, half dozen of another. It's, you're not dead. You have options, right? You're not, and in their view of that, Enron's a great example, or Bernie Madoff, and or quite frankly, the financial meltdown. The people who made off with those funds, they're seen as physically harmless criminals. People who have not damaged another human being. It's just money. And, making money and having money is a rough and tumble game. And if you get screwed by these people, then, it's bad. But it's like, if they do go to jail, they should still be able to play golf kind of jail, right? Never mind the fact that when Enron did what they did, and we had rolling blackouts in California, and people lose their life savings because they've been cheated by someone like Madoff, whatever, that shortens people's lives. That oftentimes can directly be tied to people dying. It is, and there's a certain reckless indifference that is on a level scale-wise much more dangerous than a desperate person with a gun dealing with the fact that they killed a person in face to face, because there's a guilt element that a lot of those people deal with. Not all of them. Some of them are pure psychopaths, and it doesn't matter. But there are people who have killed other people in the commission of a crime who are tortured every day by that experience, and they go to jail for a very long time, and even after they come out, they are tortured by the fact that they harmed or killed another human being. Like I said, not all of them, but a good portion of them, especially if it was a one-off violent crime. However, the indifference of certain white-collar criminals to the damage done and the shortening and taking of lives that occurs by their behavior is antiseptic and sociopathic on such a dangerous level that if they had the chance to do it again, they would absolutely do it. They only stopped because they got caught, and they are in the same realm morally as a serial killer. But the Republicans, seem to have this special class of, well, hey, it's white-collar crime. It's businessmen doing business. If you can commit a crime while playing golf, can we call it a crime? And so if Donald Trump wanted to keep his buildings afloat by getting millions of dollars from Russia, or having, buying a piece of real estate and having it bought for twice its value, so that person, by the way, who bought their money, rotating money through that, gets to buy something else back from Trump in another country or in another space, or gets part of it sold back to him on even level, so he keeps 10-20% of that $50 million. That's money laundering. And in the course of doing that, everyone who was harmed in the acquisition of that money, everyone who was harmed in what will be done with that money later, every business person who has to go up against Donald Trump in a real estate dealing that is operating within the law is harmed, and everybody they are working with is harmed. If you're trying to play by the rules and actually do this, every time somebody skirts the rules and goes about it in such a way that they will take money from nearly anyone, regardless of the fact that the money might have come from the Afghan opium trade, arms sales to North Korea, simply the gutting of the financial well-being of your average Russian. That shortens lives. That kills people. But they shrug it off like, yeah, well, he's a successful businessman. But if you did what he did on a on a micro scale on your own home, if you bailed out your home loan after 2008 by taking money from a drug dealer or an assassin or someone illegally trading uranium with North Korea, you think you get a pass from the Republicans who are shrugging off Trump's relationship with Russians right now? If you support him, that's one thing. Think about that. We'll be back. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. More of your calls after the break. Hey, chat room. Good to see you. I'm sorry I got on a rant about that because it was that's been really irritating lately. Congratulations, Driftglass. Right on. 400th episode of the Professional Left Podcast. That's impressive. Are you on 5 days a week? Is that how you do it? And then, that is impressive. Either way, good for you. Put this up. Okay. Should be able to feed this through the thing. I'll check the audio on this because I want to get this in there. Oh, and I'm going to find that tweet. It's driving me nuts. But essentially that I think it's John Schindler who's been incredibly correct through a lot of this stuff. Oh, my hair's all lopsided. I don't know how that happened. Beg your pardon. He says they've got tape of Hannity coordinating with Russian media outlets and intelligence services, talking to Assange, WikiLeaks, RT, and Sputnik to coordinate a message. I don't know if it's all of them or some of them or like them or straight up just an intelligence service that spoke to those same groups, but he's on tape doing it. We have the documents. So, let's see real quick. I want to do this.
President Trump has repeatedly downplayed his business ties to Russia, but a fascinating new piece of journalism tracks 3 decades of Russian money connected to Trump properties. Trump's Russian laundromat reads the headline in the New Republic, quote, "Whether Trump knew it or not, Russian mobsters and corrupt oligarchs use Trump's properties not only to launder vast sums of money from extortion, drugs, gambling, and racketeering, but even as a base of operations for their criminal activities. Without the Russian mafia, it is fair to say Donald Trump would not be president of the United States. That is a weighty charge." And
yeah, it is. Mm-hmm.
$30 seconds.
Excellent.
You're listening to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide.
I've had people walk out of me before, but not when I was being so charming.
Video streaming at halsparks.com.
I don't care for you or for the putrid sludge you're troweling out.
Damn puss-faced little pimpstick.
True progressive talk.
Might be a good time for you guys to give up.
Welcome back to the show. I want to play a little clip, and this kind of relates to what I was talking to. This was when I think Brian Williams had an author from the New Republic on his show to talk about where the money for Trump Tower and a lot of his properties came from.
President Trump has repeatedly downplayed his business ties to Russia, but a fascinating new piece of journalism tracks 3 decades of Russian money connected to Trump properties. Trump's Russian laundromat reads the headline in the New Republic, quote, "Whether Trump knew it or not, Russian mobsters and corrupt oligarchs use Trump's properties not only to launder vast sums of money from extortion, drugs, gambling, and racketeering, but even as a base of operations for their criminal activities. Without the Russian mafia, it is fair to say Donald Trump would not be president of the United States. That is a weighty charge. And with us tonight, the author of this piece, Craig Unger, a contributor at the New Republic. Before I even let you say a word, I've got another paragraph I want to read to you that you wrote. Over the past 3 decades, at least 13 people with known or alleged links to Russian mobsters or oligarchs have owned, lived in, and even run criminal activities out of Trump Tower and other Trump properties. Many used his apartments and casinos to launder untold millions in dirty money. Some ran a worldwide high-stakes gambling ring out of Trump Tower and a unit directly below one owned by Trump.
If you want to know when he was first compromised by the Russians, I go back 33 years, in 1984, and at that time, a guy named David Bogadin walked into Trump Tower. He was a Russian immigrant, and he had ties to the most powerful crime ring in Russia. And he sat down with Donald Trump, and he bought not one apartment, not two, but 5 condos in Trump Towers. And the state attorney general later ruled that that was laundering money. And Trump Towers, in many ways...
Okay, so that if you want to watch that, that's available online. You can go do that. But the article on in the New Republic, by the way, David Bogadin, who he's talking about, who came into Trump Tower, had apparently arrived in New York City with $3 in his pocket and was a former pilot in the Soviet Army. Keep in mind, according to all known records, Putin makes something like $120,000 a year in his salary, and yet his net worth is said to be $200 billion. And a former pilot in the Soviet Army shows up in New York with $3 in his pocket, and 7 years later, he is able to buy 5 condos in Trump Tower. Now that is either the greatest story of immigrants ever told. Which, by the way, in his argument that we should limit the immigrants who come into Stephen Miller coming out with his mega mind-shaped head, coming out and saying, we want people who come here who speak English. We want people who are contributing to the United States, who are part of, ultimately will be, good American citizens eventually, who are makers and achievers, who aren't coming here to be on the dole the entire time, right? Any of those folks? We want, people who are going to be a success story. Man, you could not look for a better success story than a friend of Donald Trump's, David Bogatin. Came over here in 1980. If you were a presidential candidate and you had a guy who lived just below you, bought 5 of your, came to America with $3 in his pocket, why wouldn't you honestly, why wouldn't you tell his story? You want to make your case for why you want to let certain people immigrate to this country and not others? You want to make the case that that there are people who come here legally as part of legal immigration, and they really want what's best for their families and themselves. They strive and they come here legally to America. They speak great English. I learned the greatest English. Don't worry about me, man. I learned great English in the FSB. They got great English program over there, dude. They speak English very well. They're paler even than I am. And they come over here from a country where, freedom is not allowed, man. And, they managed to come over to the United States in the 80s. And then right around the time Putin starts having a complete control over that government, when things really start to shift and money's starting to be moved out of that country, and increasingly, it's becoming a hub for multinational criminal organizations are setting their sights on Russia to become a great, place for them to, kind of plant their business. It is a raw, brand new capitalist structure with a functioning intelligence service and security apparatus. What could possibly go wrong? And this guy comes in, arrives in New York with $3 in his pocket, just a pilot in the Army, and a few years later is able to buy, by the way, meets personally with Donald Trump and buys 5 Trump Tower offices. He buys it says, instead, he was fixated on the glitziest apartment building on Fifth Avenue, a gaudy 58-star edifice with gold-plated fixtures and pink marble, Trump Tower. And this guy was the same age as Donald Trump. They had a little meeting. And he, I guess the building, was very impressive to people. And it was selling very quickly. The Russian plunked down $6 million to buy not 1 or 2, but 5 luxury condos. And the big check apparently caught the attention of the owner. According to Wayne Barrett, who investigated the deal for the Village Voice, Trump personally attended the closing along with Bogatin. So he was there. Here he is, President of the United States, making his argument that we got to stop taking all these Guatemalans and Mexicans who are sneaking across our border with heroin and rape kits in their duffel bags, and they're taking jobs from your average American, and it's just wrong. And we got to focus what we want, our immigration to look like. We want to direct our immigration. We want to limit our immigration, first of all, cut it in half as far as volume, and we want to make sure that the people who come here are business people who speak English and the like. And if you were trying to sell that storyline, you would kind of look no further than David Bogatin. Quite frankly, even with the Russian stink around him, Bogatin doesn't sound like a really heavy Russian name. It's not up there with Sergei Lavrov and and Kislyak, It's one of those, it's guy David Bogatin, kind of your very, very average kind of multinational name, nondescript. Why wouldn't you tell that story? Especially if you were pushing against the Russian thing. If you were saying, look, not only, this is why they don't like Russians. I'll tell you why. Because these people are bootstrappers. There was a guy who came over here and bought 5 of my condos. He'd only been in the country 7 years. I mean, what better story could you tell to push your immigration idea than the David Bogatin story if you're Donald Trump, if you're Stephen Miller? Honestly. I mean, this is classic politician talking point. The man walked into your office. He bought him with cash. Why wouldn't you talk about him? Probably the same reason you won't say a bad word about Putin. Because the whole thing is sketchy. That's why. Because Donald Trump knows this. That's why he wants to fire Mueller. That's why he's pissed off about this. And that's why Sean Hannity and Julian Assange are both covering for him and seem to be oddly on board. Not odd for Hannity, definitely odd for Assange. There is nothing about how the Russian government operates in the world in terms of Syria or any of their other adventurism. Their actions towards their own citizens as far as limiting dissent, jailing people, all that stuff. It would be prime WikiLeaks attack fodder. And some reason, Julian Assange has caught the same illness that Trump has. It's increasingly curious. When we come back, more of your calls. 773-763-9278. Am I the only person who's really struck by how curious that is? As an obvious, easy... and think about the storyline. Just track this mentally as an American citizen if you wanted this to work. Mid-1980s, we're at the height of the Cold War. Reagan is, turning the Russian system more towards an American system. There's real diplomacy going on. After a lot of saber rattling, we eventually get to the let's start this over, my name's Ron moment, which is so classic in Republican legends. And then 90s come, new open markets. Movies like White Knights in the 80s where, you've got Russians escaping and defection movies, Moscow on the Hudson, and all these other stories, and you got this idea that people want to get out of Russia so they can be free like us. Right about the time this dude shows up, right around the time David Bogatin shows up, this is when this is at the height of awesome. Look, this dude got out, man. He's making it. He's gonna, he escaped Russia. He's not, he wants to come here and enjoy our freedom and our democracy and our capitalism. And a few years later, This dude is able to buy 5 luxury condos.
15 seconds.
Thank you. In Trump Tower. Why wouldn't you talk about it? Why wouldn't you sell that?
Now back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, 773-763-9278.
Welcome back. By the way, all this, I'm obviously speaking in circles about that David Bogatin, and of course why Trump won't talk about that, because it stinks to high heaven, and the transaction seems suspicious even at the time. That's why the Village Voice did a story on it. And at the time, Russian mobsters were beginning to invest, according to the article, in high-end real estate, which offered an ideal vehicle to launder money from their criminal enterprises. During the 80s and 90s, we in the U.S. government repeatedly saw a pattern by which criminals would use condos and high-rises to launder money, says Jonathan Weiner, a Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for International Law Enforcement in the Clinton administration. It didn't matter that you paid too much because the real estate values would rise, and it was a way of turning dirty money into clean money. It was done very systematically and explained why there were so many high-rises where the units were sold, but no one was living in them. When Trump Tower was built, as David K. Johnson reports, the making of Donald Trump, it was only the second high-rise in New York that accepted anonymous buyers. Honestly, what the hell? So, of course he can't talk about this because it stinks to high heaven. It's sketchy. And if anybody looks any deeper into this, if he brought it up at a campaign rally, everybody would go, oh, who's David Bogatin? Let's look into this then. Let's look into where that money came from. Let's see if the bank he was, the money was coming through had a source that was even slightly sketchy. So he doesn't bring it up, and he won't bring it up. Even though if he was truthful and he had nothing to fear from the Russian investigation and the reality of his, and his immigration message that he is pushing, was part of his legitimate political beliefs and not just kind of a whitewash, cloaked racist attempt to slow like Hispanic and Muslim people from coming into the country for his base and push back to some degree on Asian people coming and going to big colleges from overseas for the upper edge of the white conservative base. In reality, this would be a very comfortable conversation. This would be a success story he could use. And the fact that he doesn't or can't or won't speaks volumes about the depth of what Mueller is ultimately going to find. Let's take another call. Who do we have, Lady B?
We have Dave from Hoffman Estate.
Cool. Hey, Dave. Welcome.
Hey, Al. Yeah, earlier you were talking about with this Assange and that. Isn't this the same guy? He kind of played Obama at the end there via WikiLeaks that he had agreed to extradition. He pledged on Twitter that, if they had commutated Chelsea Manning's sentence.
Yep. He said he would come out if they commuted Chelsea Manning's sentence. They did. Obama did on his way out, and Julian Assange is still in the Ecuadorian embassy.
Yeah, and then I believe the Swedes, they'd even dropped the charges.
Well, they didn't drop the charges. They didn't effectively drop the charges. This is where the languaging is, basically Assange has used this way to exonerate himself. But what effectively is they stop the investigation, meaning that they pay to have ongoing investigations. You can't just have open-ended investigations. They have to be tied to a budgetary outlay. Most governments do it that way so that you just can't have like a permanent investigation open on somebody, especially if there's a statute of limitations aspect of it. So they don't have, citizens under constant investigation. So Swedes are pretty good about that.
Earlier you mentioned about that Manning, Snowden, and that reality winner and that.
Yeah.
There was one you forgot out of that one out of the three of them, the one more was he would be more like the white collar, as you mentioned, criminal. That was Petraeus, David Petraeus.
Mm-hmm.
He got pretty much just a slap on the wrist that time, and I think Trump even was considering him for a cabinet post.
Sure. Well, and let's not forget, in all the big flail about Hillary Clinton's emails and her playing ducks and drakes with secure information, and even put aside for a moment that Donald Trump told Israeli intelligence to the Russians that had to do with Syria, where they have a stake on the opposite side of our interests within that country. We burned an Israeli asset that the Israelis had because he was joking around. Let's understand that that's the context in which we are criticizing Hillary Clinton's use of, or protection of secure information. And let's also forget 33,000 emails that they claim have disappeared, still haven't shown up. So either they didn't exist in the first place, or, very specifically, she was good at eliminating stuff that might get out later that may have had compromising information on it, which is certainly better than the Trumps are at hiding classified information. But Petraeus literally said that he thought Gmail was secure. This man ran the CIA, and he thought sending national secrets over Gmail was a secure way of doing it. The goofy, idiotic madness of that thought, and that Trump would still consider him for a post, or that he has become some sort of hero for the right, considering how much they vilify.
He had lied to the FBI. When he was out, he had the files up in his attic yet. Hey, I'm going to leave you with this one, pal. You mentioned about the immigrants and that he wants them to be able to speak English and be a... This is coming from a man that can't spell English too good, as in Kofifi.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Well, and never mind the fact that he had relatives, as many people do, who came here and didn't speak the language, learned on the fly, escaped, especially economic, systems, like Russia, like Germany, that where they just had to get out. A lot of people don't have time to take English before they escape a change in government in their own country that might get them killed. So sometimes you just got to get out.
Let me get you in the side house so you can get to the other guy.
Appreciate it. Thank
Good
you.
Talking to you.
You too. Appreciate it. Let's take another call, Lady B.
We have Mitchell from California.
Cool. Hey, Mitchell. Welcome. Go ahead.
Hey, what proof do you have? What proof do you have that any actual votes were changed by the Russians in any of the states?
In terms of, you mean like hacked voting machines?
Yeah. What proof do you have that during the election, your narrative is all about how the Russians hacked the election? What proof?
I didn't say they hacked the election. Although there were 150,000 hits on voter registration systems in Wisconsin alone, leading up on the day of the election itself, and a similar number in the days leading up. Those specifically came from Russian servers and Macedonian hackers. At a certain point, here's my question. Here's my question for you. Let me finish. I answered your question. Mitchell, I answered your question. Here's my question for you. Why does it bother you that they did, and that dealing with that comes to light? Why is it important to you that they not get punished for trying to do that?
Well, first of all, you got to look at what happened in Wisconsin when Jill Stein went into Wisconsin and when they got the findings. Mm-hmm. That's what you have to base this on the concrete evidence of the electoral judges from Wisconsin, not your opinion. And
I'm not basing it on my opinion.
That there was no collusion.
What evidence do you have that there's no collusion? What evidence do you have that there's no collusion?
There was no collusion, and there's also no votes that were changed. You can't have it both ways. You can't both be right.
Yes, I can.
So
they can actually have the Russians can absolutely have a specific strategic attack on our voter registration systems, both for the targeting of and the elimination of and the manipulation of voter rolls, both in the previous election and in ongoing issues with it, which is why you go after a crime. One of the big reasons why we go after a criminal is because we don't want them on the street to do it again, correct? That you go after a rapist not just to punish them for the rape, but to make sure they don't rape anyone else. You go after a murderer because not just to punish the rape, the murder, and make yourself feel good about getting a murderer, but because you know that that person has a chance that they will do it again or worse. That increasingly, if you have a serial killer who has a consistent... Look, the truth is, Mitchell, you don't care. Why don't you care? Why doesn't it bother you that the Russians absolutely have a strategic attack on our...
That's something to back it up with. That's all I'm saying.
Say again, sorry?
If you're going to make a statement, you're making this narrative, okay? You got to have something concrete to back it up.
There's tons of stuff to back it up on.
You're giving way too much credit for the average person that really understood politics in the election.
No, I'm not.
Okay?
I don't care if you understand it or not. You don't have to understand the difference between first-degree and second-degree murder to know that someone is dead. You don't have to understand the reasoning for having someone taken off the street if they are a dangerous, violent, or a white-collar criminal. The reality is, look, you're operating from the position of it benefited you, so it's not really a crime. And that's the problem.
You're projecting that statement. That's not what I said.
I didn't say it was what you said. I'm inferring that meaning from what you were talking about because you seem to have a real problem with looking into it. Why don't you want it looked into? Why don't you want it investigated? Why don't you think that's important?
Robert Mueller, according to AP yesterday, said that Trump is not being investigated, okay, over collusion. So you can't be both right. So either AP's wrong and you're wrong.
No, he's investigating. He's specific. Hold on. He's specifically investigating the Trump organization. His initial mandate is to investigate the Trump organ. Hold on. You want to talk in double speak, but you don't want to deal with the reality.
Do you know the difference?
Yes.
I don't think so.
Yes, I do. And the thing that you...
Can you please tell me
the important part that you're skating in an attempt to exonerate Trump from any behavior in this is that Mueller's initial mandate is to go after the Trump campaign colluding with the Russians. Now, you can say that Trump as an individual was not in command or control of that coordination when that was occurring, and that ultimately the only people that will be in any kind of legal jeopardy because of it will be Kushner, Flynn, Manafort, people where there is increasing evidence that they did that very thing. Flynn himself offered to give a story based on that idea in exchange for immunity. This is a man who said from the stump, you only ask for immunity if you're guilty of a crime. So taking at their own words, this is enough. Secondarily, the idea that Trump as an individual is not the specific indicted member of this primary target of this investigation is exactly how all RICO cases run. You don't end up going for the top gangster at first. You end up working your way up the chain. And that is increasingly what the Trump campaign and Trump himself seem to be the most concerned with. If you believe that you are innocent and that there was no collusion, you have nothing to fear from this quote-unquote fishing expedition or this witch hunt, because if you're squeaky clean about it, it's not an issue. But if you do have financial ties to Russian oligarchs and they have laundered money criminally through your organization over the years, as many articles, even before he ran for president, have talked about, that's a point of concern. And you, as a citizen, have to decide for yourself whether you're okay with that. And it seems that you are. Yeah, bye. Exactly. We'll take a break. It's the House Sparks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. More of your calls after this. Boom. putting up with right-wing talking point BS. No, I'm not. Because here's my problem with a caller like that is if you're arguing that your concern is, and this may be a legitimate concern, or at least presented as a legitimate concern by liberals, who think we have bigger fish to fry. Stuff the DOJ is saying, stuff that Sessions is involved in that really should concern us and make us want to, that if we get caught up talking about this stuff, we may never, this stuff will sneak by under the radar. Okay, well, first of all, increasingly that is not the case. The very fact that we are so focused on the Russian storyline is the one thing that's keeping the Republicans from rallying around Trump permanently and protect and operate, circling the wagons around him. It is the one thing that makes him stink to enough of the populace that you arguably can keep his more egregious acts at bay or, undermine their popularity, right? So it is valuable. It is important to keep, the pressure on about this because it is an Achilles heel. It is hinky. It does stink to high heaven, and there is something there. So you can say this, well, it'll never lead to him being impeached. It'll, you can believe whatever storyline you want to sell to kind of limit your own experience, your own, sort of get a grip on your own political take on it. But let's be abundantly clear. The stuff that's really worrisome that he would rather be carrying on would have stampeded through Congress had it not been for the Russian investigation affecting his. So, and I don't mean that this is a way to, that some false narrative is somehow, some false narrative is keeping him tied up from doing his real work. Is that the fact that there is a there in this is incredibly telling, and is what keeps him from enacting even more violent civil rights and regulatory.
I'm Dick Kay from Back on the Beat, and here is the Mega Worldwide Radio Program with Hal Sparks.
Welcome back to the show. Let's take another caller, Lady B. Who do we have? That one was...
we have Ann on the south side.
Hey there.
Hi, go ahead.
I have so much to say, and I'm going to try and say it very fast.
Okay.
After your conversation with Mitchell, how many Russians have been rounded up by ICE since Trump's been in office?
Mm-hmm.
Another thing, people need to look to what's going on in their states, other states.
Mm-hmm.
The water situation in Flint, the schools in Michigan, police going to schools and working as undercover agents and basically entrapping kids with drugs and let's see what else. The laws that are being passed in Missouri, that you can fire somebody because of their race or gender or whatever. And in Kentucky, the law that was passed that said that one branch of government can't investigate the executive branch.
Mm-hmm.
We need to look at all this stuff because that is the plan for the whole country.
Right.
And how people react to that shows them what they need to do in order to get it going.
Yeah.
Another thing that's really...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Continue real quick because, I want to make sure you get what you need.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Another thing is this. I think I have a brilliant idea. Voter suppression is taxation without representation.
Right.
If your name is purged from the voter rolls, you should not have to pay 1 cent of tax until your name is reinstated.
That's fascinating. That's an interesting basis of a sort of a governmental class action lawsuit. It's there have been. That's. I would actually encourage you to contact any one of the major either the ACLU or any of the major voter rights organizations and try to press that with them. It's an interesting angle. I don't know what the legal depth of it is, but it certainly would make a strong case. I personally think that there's so many cases of a right delayed is a right denied, and in many ways, by making sure that certain areas don't have enough voting machines, the lines are too long, that blue collar and no collar workers especially are in danger of losing their job or their place of to live. Those, if they go vote that day, is a
voting holiday.
Yeah, right. Well, that in and of itself, like it absolutely should be a 48-hour, or at least a 24-hour holiday period, and that voting availability should be available the day leading up to the 8 o'clock deadline or whatever on voting day itself. That you can go into a polling place and it runs all night essentially, so that if you work a day shift or a night shift or something like that, and your sleep schedule is off, and you're one of these people who's driving a forklift at 4 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning as a living, and you could literally sleep the entire day away, but you work your butt off. You should have that option, no matter what state you're in. And if states want to say, no, we're going to control our own state, well, that's fine. You can affect your local state, your governorship, your state senate, all that stuff. But a federal election should meet federal standards so that we guarantee everybody has the right across the board to vote, for their federal offices, because it affects all of us. If people in Michigan are denied the right to vote for their senator or their congresspeople in a legitimate way, it affects the strength of a vote or a political idea within the Congress itself, which affects every other voter in the country. It is a way of certain states to bully people, as far as legislation goes, because they can
exactly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I go ahead. I don't want to jump to something else, but I just thought of something else, and I just want to say this, to finish it. I'm so sorry for interrupting you.
That's okay.
This is what divide and conquer looks like. We have been divided.
Yep.
Ask yourself who is doing the conquering.
That's right. I
all
agree.
That's all I got.
I appreciate the call, and I think, and that's why you'll often hear me saying that even though I vehemently disagree with certain, people's political ideas, I am no fan of the Jeff Sessions of the world. I think there are bigots and racists, and basically white collar criminals threaded throughout the entire government who have taken advantage of this for years. I think that the way to get them out is not some sort of psychological purge, but to be open to people to make their political or sociological argument without questioning their humanity. So those that do use that as a weapon are weeded out immediately. So we can get back to what's the best idea for the best of all people. And it's a democracy. And we have to live with the discomfort of a democracy sometimes. And anybody who tells you shouldn't have to live with the discomfort of a democracy is selling something, and it's usually the destruction of that democracy. I appreciate the call. Let's grab another call real quick if we can, Lady B.
We have Dave from San Francisco.
Excellent. Hey, Dave.
Howdy, Hal. Man, she was a great call.
I agree.
A lot of good material.
Yep.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, one of the things that she's a great example, if you think back to year 2000, when all of those people were purged from the Florida voter list and led to the Bush election, the people who were improperly taken off by the company ChoicePoint, it took them 8 years to get back on the voting list. So they they knew they got cheated in 2000. They could not vote in 2004, and the courts in Florida only granted them reestablished voting status by the year 2008. So she's dead right. I mean, imagine if the state was going to lose taxes for 8 years from a great number of the citizenry.
Yeah,
that'd be quite a an incentive to get back to mandamus.
I think as a in terms of Republicans and Democrats themselves, Democrats definitely have a I think it could an issue that they could run on in many ways, a very specific thing that they could run on, saying, this is going to be one of our things. We are going to push this, that the states will lose local funding on certain programs if they do not guarantee the protection of the vote of all legitimate voters within their states. And if enough of them come forward and file lawsuits that they were not able to vote because of limitations put forth on them, the state loses funding on something intrinsically important like a highway program or that wouldn't quite work. But in terms of structural funding that they count on to balance their budgets, especially red states that borrow that money from Democratic states.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Why is New York? I was saying, why is New York State and California paying so that Michigan, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Tennessee can disenfranchise big swaths of their voters? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, that gets into one of the things that both she and you raised a little while earlier, and that's part of the reason why our representative system has fallen apart. It came about a little over 100 years ago when the 1914 Congress declared that we would top out our congressmen at 435 rather than get more and more congressmen as the population increased.
Right.
And the original Constitution said that we would get a new congressman for every 30,000 people. And if you just look at it in terms of Montana, they should, that jerk that just got elected by beating up the reporter, they only have one congressman in the entire state of Montana, when the math for that, based on 30,000 population, would mean they would have 13 congressmen.
Right.
So if you extrapolate that for the entire United States, the workload on a congressman is now well over 700,000 people. Instead of 30,000, a congressman has got to represent over 700,000 people.
Right.
And there's no way that we're going to honestly get representation with a mathematical formula that's not only 700,000 now, but next year it's going to be closing in on 8. And this is designed sabotage, which came about 100 years ago. And until we get that resolved, we cannot get honest representation.
I agree.
Because
in terms of
about
go real quick.
You think about a congressman that's been bribed 20 years ago and he's still in office. That bribe of 20 years ago may still take precedence over every vote. And,
right.
If somebody just blackmails somebody based on something of 20 years ago, go ahead.
How much control did somebody have over Dennis Hastert over the years? I mean, that's always a concern.
Sure.
But I think, quite frankly, like the idea that we would have a congressperson for every 30,000 people in a country of 330 million would be insanity. But I do think there's something to be said for saying that, okay, what was the percentage where 30,000 was growth for that population at the time? There should be an equivalent for that on a percentage level. So it doesn't have to be for every 30,000. Maybe at this point in history, it's for every 150,000. But it still makes your point that there should be more representatives available to those groups of people. And, quite frankly, that if a state clears a certain point as far as its volume of human beings, then the idea that they should get another senator isn't ruled out either. The idea that Kentucky has 2 senators representing its interests, one of them being the majority leader, and the other one basically running the crazy wing, while California, while Kentucky has basically the population of the San Fernando Valley in California, north of Los Angeles.
Right.
They have 2 senators represent. In California, the senators represent all of San Diego, all of Los Angeles, all of San Francisco, and the rest of the rural parts of the states in entirety. That's a crazy volume of human beings who, by the way, only have 2 votes. Californians only have 2 votes in the Congress. That weight and that tip in the senatorial argument about Obamacare, for example. Imagine that played out in those terms. We got to take a break. I appreciate the call. All great points. Yeah, we'll be back. Check on the boy. See what the question was. Mid-change, running into my, trying to ask me what pants he should be wearing. And we're back. Hi. Excellent. Camden.
$15 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome back to the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. It's now time for the happy ending.
Welcome back to the show. I think we have a couple more calls, so let's get to them right away. Because it's
we have one more.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, go ahead. Who's it?
Hi, Al. Thanks for getting me on. Great show. I'd like to connect my comment to the comment that I think his name was Mitchell, which is sort of a fatuous bait and switch that's used from the hard right all the time. Now that they backed off, that there's no evidence, just collusion. And that argument is that the Russians did not materially affect the vote.
Right.
That's actually irrelevant and not what the argument is. Mm-hmm. And why would they be attacking social media sites trying to spread fake news about Hillary Clinton? And the obvious reason is to suppress or divert her vote. Recently, there's been a couple of stories. Actually, there's many. I'll just mention two. You may or may not know that Michael Flynn had to refile again his forms for security clearance because he accepted $30-some thousand from an analytic company. I think it's called SCL, that's closely related to the hard right sort of wackadoodle Robert Mercer, his Cambridge Analytics. SCL is a company that was involved with Brexit. They're involved with exactly the same kind of tampering. They're also involved with the Turkish government and the same, group of characters that would ultimately include Russians or allow for links to that would show what was going on in terms of our election. You may know that the Republican consultant group left open for a couple of days 90% of the voter files that would have given information.
Yeah, we talked about that were posted online at a mystery email or a mystery IP address, just sitting there. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to give you this stuff, but remember all that footage of Mitch McConnell smiling weirdly at the camera years ago, and people realize that, one of the ways that super PACs coordinate with candidates when they're not supposed to is that they don't say, hey, here's footage to use in your ads. We're just going to post this footage online for anybody to use, but we'll leave it private, and only certain people will get the IP for that. You know, kind of like you just stumbled across it, right? We didn't realize. We only had it up there for a couple days. That way we legally we're separate. You know, we legally had no attachment to it. There's a firewall of ignorance between us. But when in reality, it's absolute coordination.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So data analytics is a place to look. And remember, Kushner was, and head of Trump's data analytics.
Right.
And I think, again, this is one of those cases. It's like use Occam's razor. You talk about all the connections that you know about right now. And the easiest conclusion is, yes, of course, there was sharing of data or some form of sharing of strategy. That my bet was part of what was discussed in that meeting with Don Jr. and Manafort and Trump Towers.
That's right.
There's more stuff now about, that was just confirmed about Manafort and having asked for help. Well, once again, if you look at how Paul Manafort is and what his, source of livelihood has been over the years, it's another big duh. That of course there's collusion. Now, whether or not Trump, or it could be proven that Trump explicitly knew about it, is beside the point. And you did a great job defending that. But, the talking points of the hard right attempt to divert from the obvious. And I think that among the other things that Mueller has, and I wish they didn't just talk about obstruction of justice, because the idea that a campaign would collude with a adversarial foreign power during an election, is at least in ordinary language used treason.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
It's unthinkable. It's unthinkable, and that's exactly what's happening here. And it's very bizarre that at least a quarter of the population is just accommodating itself to it.
Yeah, I think part of it is, again, they're in a psychological circumstance where they, like a lot of the Republican Party is, in that as long as they're getting what they want, they don't care who's delivering. And this fits this kind of dirty, hairy, fantasy they have about cops too. Is as long as they clean up the streets, if a couple of innocent people get killed, or people who are in the process of cleaning themselves up, or like we can have a death penalty. Yeah, there might be an occasional innocent person put to death, but I would rather have that because I want the bad guys to get their comeuppance. My sense of vengeance overrides my humanity. In terms of, oh, crap, if we have a death penalty, quite frankly, there is no way to guarantee we won't kill an innocent person. So rather than do that, we will lock up people forever rather than be responsible for the death of an innocent person. And so that's the uncomfortable, oftentimes frustrating part of being civilized. Well, I think there's a lot of elements to, as long as they're carrying out the sort of anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, they're satiating that fear. And then as long as they push the idea that if your child is gay or transgender, that it's a mental illness and they can be cured or talked out of it or Christed out of it, as long as you keep that narrative alive, that's a level of social comfort I'm comfortable with having. And I don't care if you paid for all your buildings with money from Russian slave trades. And that's that. I mean, there's a ton of people, that I would say 25% of the populace, the same 25%, by the way, who believes that, the sun revolves around the earth, which is the current statistic. Those people, there's a lot of overlap. And as long as they feel like their strategy, their circumstance is getting, what they want is getting done, they don't care who carries it out. And Trump, to some degree, has been playing at that for a very long time. The reality is, though, what ultimately do you want? Do you want a functioning democracy? Do you want the United States of America? Do you want freedom, or do you eventually want to be turned into a Russian control structure. And you have to have that, when they came for the other, I was silent, and when they came for me, there was no one to yell. That's where we find ourselves with a lot of this stuff. The point is, argue the points all you want, but I'm not going to argue people's humanity. And even Mitchell, our caller, who I think is deluded and wrong, is welcome to his opinion. This is America. And I'll stand for that as long as I have breath in my body. You guys are awesome. Thank you to everybody in the chat room, especially those that threw some love our way in the super chat. We'll see you next week. Thanks, Fester. Thanks, Charles. Thanks, Jude. Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, Billy. Thanks, and thanks, Julian and Carl, for running our chat room. Thank you, Lady B. Oh, Steve, does Mitchell, is he one of the regulars who calls in like that? Yeah, that wouldn't be surprised. Thank you. And thank you, Carl and Julia. Really appreciate you guys being, the troll hunters for us. There's there are so many Mitchells out there want C-SPAN, Washington Journal. It seems like the supporters higher than Thursday. Maybe the race is the line. Thanks. Are you in Paris right now? Are you in France right now and you're just rubbing that part of it in? Great. Okay.
Like a regular airplane. So it's a real workhorse for the Marines.
Okay, that was... Everyone was fairly well behaved, I have to say. Even our visiting Lab Rats fans and whatnot. I think it's because I've been able to give everybody else something else to watch by throwing up those other shows, which I'll continue to do, by the way. So don't forget to like and subscribe if you're just seeing this for the first time. I'm not doing a post-show show today, because I'm gathering up the fam and heading out. But I greatly appreciate everybody's input today. And I will say I am filling in for Norman, but on the 1st of September, I think, because I was going to do the 20th and 29th, but I'm doing a Concert for America, and I guess there's a problem getting a link up while I'm on the road. So, calls every show, same talking points from Hanny the night before. That's not surprising at all, Steve. Yeah, oddly enough, Fessa Frank, Mark Zuckerberg broached the subject of universal basic income in the recent commencement speech, something that isn't often mentioned. Yeah, that's absolutely true. There's a question, though, about the universal income that they're looking at both the financial base that it has, versus what is effectively guided income by Medicare, by welfare rather. Is that in some ways it's gaining form strictly because you'll give these people this money and they'll be able to spend it on whatever. Anybody who's on welfare will be able to spend their money on whatever, including junk food and liquor and what have you, and that helps certain industries. So certain industries are all for sort of a switch away either from any limitations on what you can use food stamps and other stuff to buy towards this idea. You'll see certain industries, especially industries that are like oil and gas and the Walmarts of the world will be pushing for a universal sort of baseline income concept, and I'm for it in abstract. My concern is that they're looking for this to just drain it out. There's this constant conversation that happens where they say if you take out, if you took everybody's money away, if you took all the rich people, everybody's money, and just gave it to everybody evenly, in a matter of a year, it would all be back in the same places. This is and true or not, this is a constant refrain, and it's parts of it are largely true, just because of who runs stuff and who's habitually runs stuff and how they know how to run stuff versus people who, from a consumer standpoint, will buy whatever they want right away and then it'll be gone. This is if you did it over a period of time, over a decade, and people were able to learn how to structurally grow their income, and they were more financially aware, or the ability for people to to climb from up the economic ladder was strategically delivered in the United States, which I think should be a point. This idea that, home economics and those kind of ideas taught in school, and then progressive information on investment and those kind of things should be part of our schooling in the country, and that adults should be able freely to go to credit restructuring and investment and like classes on that kind of stuff provided on a basically for free would eventually help people climb out of poverty. There's a bunch of people who would, rather than do that, they would rather have the baseline income, knowing that people will basically spend that baseline income in very predictable ways, and they'll take advantage of it. That's my only concern with it. So, which is why I think if you're going to do that, eventually you're going to find a move for higher taxation on junk food and on specific taxes on junk food and liquor and cigarettes and what are effectively damaging commodities to pay for it. That we would pay for, one of the ways you would finance that is by raising the cost of those things, because otherwise you'd simply just be rotating the money into those industries. So there you go. Well, thank you, Rita Mary Sanford. I appreciate that. So. Oh, thank you, Amos. Appreciate it. You have problems with the Carrie? You having problems with the show? Now I can't even get Hal's video to show up. Try. Yeah, I'm on Safari right now. Chrome should work just fine if you have issues. So, anyways, there you go. You guys are awesome. Peace and be wild. I will see you next time. Thank you for tuning in and spreading the word and all that stuff. Greatly appreciate it. It's just it's been a blast. And next time, if John, I think Johnny's going to be with us next week, but I'll be in St. Louis doing stand up. So I don't know if I'll go up to Chicago for the day, depending. Sometimes I do crazy stuff like that, and it's not that horribly far. And be in studio with Johnny. That would be lovely. We'll figure it out. I'll let you know. You guys are awesome. Peace and be wild. Talk to you soon. All right, bye.